All right, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
What?
Not that you actually want to, but you have to now.
What'd you
So
say?
you should have lied.
I'll do this.
Okay. We're going to go live onto Facebook here in a second.
Ooh, Facebook, huh?
Hmm.
Did we talk? What order are we going in, by the way?
There's no order.
All right. I gotta shave.
Don't overthink it, Matt. You're just hanging out with everyone talking.
No, I was looking at my beard. I thought I had more time, and then all of a sudden I'm 30% done, and before I could even turn around. So, or 30% in before I could even turn around. So,
Alrighty. We are live over on Facebook.
How do I see all the peoples?
The chat, and then there's a participants.
Oh, there you
Most of the peoples are over on Facebook. So we just get some of the peoples over here.
How do I? Oh, gallery view. Here we go.
yeah, I'm not seeing the chat pop up. I tried to make it pop up, but I didn't see it.
That's all right. We'll get there. All right. What do we have? Steve and Martha Hewitt in Columbus, Ohio, joining us.
Oh, Columbus, Ohio. All right.
Nice.
Right on. So thank you again. We've got a few other people here that often make it on here. Paul Maynard, thank you for joining us again. Mike Wilkie, I see you're here. These are all the people over here on the David Rappaport as well. All the people over here on the Zoom side of things, of course, for everybody over in Facebook land. Hi, thanks for joining us. We don't really watch it from here, but we have people that do. So thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. Kick off here in just another minute or two, but it'll be a really fun show. Pour yourself a glass of wine or a taste. In our cases, I guess we're tasting, right?
I don't know, I've been here since 6 o'clock, so I'm ready for a glass.
Where's the?
Might be a short day. I might make it out of here by 5. We'll see. Yesterday was like 9 o'clock.
Yeah, I saw all of you guys were really busting your tails. Actually, yesterday, I saw all three of you at some point in time on a forklift. So
That's pretty much what we do.
yeah.
All I do is like paperwork and forklift stuff. I mean, come on.
So yeah, so for everybody watching, we're going to get started here in a second. But I tell you what, we didn't even do a practice session for this one because these guys were so busy because coming in right now, and this is just, it's that time of year, right? And so these guys have been working really hard. I went out to pick up the wines and exchange the wines to deliver them to all of them so they can all taste each other's wines and all. And all of them were running when I was there. And so it's great to see, we're busy. That's a good thing. We're picking fruit. We've got the next vintage coming along. And so I'm really grateful that you guys can actually join me on this thing today, because I'm sure you're cursing my name right now because you've got stuff to do. But I appreciate you coming on today. So,
Hey, Chris, I want to let you know that I appreciate you giving me a reason to drink in the middle of the day.
you didn't need a reason yesterday. You had lunch.
Actually,
I had one of my growers bring a 12-pack yesterday in the middle of the afternoon. I was like, why not?
There you go.
Vic, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I was questioning why I said yes, Chris. Yeah.
Got things to do.
Because I asked.
It's the beard. I think it's the beard. It projects
I
power.
always do. Somebody asks me, I always say yes. But anyway.
Right on. All right, let's kick this off. So, welcome to another Paso Wine Hangout. I'm Chris Toronto with the Paso Robles Wine Country Alliance. Thanks again for joining me. We are going to be talking about Petite Sirah today. Why? Why, you might say that? Well, it's fall. That's why. Fall has officially begun. And to me, Petite Sirah is such a cool, fun, hearty wine that you kind of now think like, oh, let's get into like stews and hearty meat type dishes and things like that, a chili or something spicy, something that this really tannic wine can really stand up to and enhance, right? So figure, okay, we just left summer and we're into fall. Let's do it. Let's do Petite. So I got 3 Petite that I feel like particular variety, and well, why do they make it? Why do they grow it? And what got them into it, right? So let's start off, though, with some introductions. So I want to start with Vic Roberts with Victor Hugo Winery. Vic, say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi. I'm been around almost before the sidewalks were here, but UCD grad 79, came to Paso in 82 after 3 years elsewhere. Spent 15 years Creston Vineyards. We planted our vineyard in the meantime, started making wine for ourselves in 97. So 125-year-old redwood barn, that's the winery. We're 100% estate. We grow everything we make, and that's a short version.
Right on. You got about 70 acres out there, is that right, under vine?
About 78, yep.
All right, right on. So it's a great spot over on Vineyard Drive. So if you ever get the chance and you're out there, and you got to give them a call for an appointment. But it's a cool spot over there in the El Pomar Templeton Gap kind of spots where they kind of meet, if you will. So Matt, you're up next. Say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself and your brand.
Hi, I'm Matt Villard. I own MCV Wines. I also graduated from Davis, but a little bit later in 2007. I worked all over the place and then ended up coming down here. I opened MCV in 2011.
All right, right on. And you're over there kind of just outside of Tin City, right?
Well, it's Tin City. It's just a new section. The owner of Tin City up this year. He's got the 3 large buildings down here, and then he's got one more big one he's putting in, and we're kind of organizing logistics of like maps and websites and signage and all that kind of stuff. And it's still all in the works. He wants to wait until he has everybody moved in before he reprints the map. So he's not reprinting a new map every 2 months and putting them up and all that kind of stuff. So it's still Tin City, if you want to call it Tin County, whatever you want to do. We got a whole lot of good people around here, so I'm pretty happy.
I was hoping that might catch on. I was calling it Tin County before.
Well, we're just a little bit south of the original one, so it's kind of fun. We actually have parking, unlike Mr. Jackson down over there.
Thanks for that, Matt. Awesome. For my wine, there's no parking.
You're up next, AJ.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see everyone. Nice to be on the show again. Chris, thanks for having me on again. Story with me started my eponymous brand, Aaron, in 2002. Born and raised here on the Central Coast. Still live in a little town here west of Paso Robles, Cayucos. If any of you have ever been to, any of the guests here have ever been to Paso Robles, maybe you head on over to the beach sometimes, go to Cayucos. And started working in vineyards out here in Paso in '99, and started my label in '02. And we focus mostly on Petite Sirah and Petite Sirah-based blends. And certainly in the beginning of my career, I was inspired by gentlemen such as Vic himself, who was one of the OG Petite Sirah people. So happy to be carrying the torch forward. And yeah, I'm also in Tin City. I'm in the original Tin City where there's no parking. So if you want to come on.
I know. I was right across the street from you when you moved in. Okay, full circle back. And we moved in a month after Barrel House, and there is absolutely no parking.
All right, so we'll get back to that.
Let's focus on the wines.
So we're talking about Petite Sirah today. What is Petite Sirah? We had a fun conversation offline just a minute ago on how to pronounce one of the parent varieties of Petite. Petite is basically a cross between Syrah and Pelosorin. Pelosorin.
Hellas, like it's not a dinosaur, man. Come on.
Puisson.
Jeez.
I've always heard it pronounced Puisson.
Puisson?
Puisson.
That's from that Iron Chef show. So what we're talking about today, though, is the fact that those two varieties came together in a greenhouse in France at one point in time. They created this.
1882.
Sorry, say that again.
1882.
1882. Thank you. And Francois Durif ended up naming it for himself, Durif or Durif. And
I'm
that,
gonna give a little. I'm gonna give a little. Give a
That's
there you
little.
go.
it.
Wow.
That's it right there. Just so
Tucson and Syrah, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Hello.
So how
It was
how
female Syrah, male
how
Tucson.
to name it after himself?
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I just realized all three of us
Keep
have
going.
wineries named after ourselves. All three of us.
Oh yeah, you do, huh? Okay. Any, as we digress, so Petite makes its way over to the States today. I think Petite, you can find it pretty much really strong here in California, up in Napa, really a lot here in Paso. I think Israel's got a good amount of it too. Go down to South Africa and even Australia, and you're going to find a good amount of Petite Sirah. But we here on the Central Coast feel like we can do it, and we can do it really well. We get nice and warm during the day, cool at night. The soil types that we have here are excellent for growing Petite Sirah. And so we have, if anything, some of the largest plantings of Petite in the state. I think maybe Lodi is a little ahead of us as far as the amount of acreage, but we're right, I think, on their heels. So today we're talking Petite. And I want to start actually with Vic, because Vic, you planted Petite back how long ago?
we actually planted Petite on site in 98. And so the first couple of vintages we made it under Victor Hugo, we actually purchased fruit from Shell Creek
Oh, okay.
out and on Shell Creek Road. And the Sintons, and I actually had worked with Petite Sirah from the Sintons off and on. I think the first time I purchased it was 1983 when I was at Creston. So it wasn't ever, maybe I wasn't doing it right, who knows. It never was one of the wines we did every year at Creston, but we occasionally would purchase some fruit from the Sintons. And so when we started Victor Hugo, I wanted to continue getting Petite Sirah. So we started making our first few vintages were from Shell Creek. And then once our own vines came into production, we transitioned. I think we've been 100% estate since about 2002 on Petite.
Right on. And so why were you kind of starting to look into Petite back in the 80s? Like, what was drawing you toward it?
Well, the completely honest answer was I got a phone call in late October from Jane Sinton, says, I have a little Petite left over. Would you like to buy it? So I bought it at Creston. So, and then the fun wine, great color, great tannin structure. I think the trick with Petite is to somewhat, and this may be atypical for Petite producers, manage the tannins. Even by managing the tannins, I think you end up with more than elegant sufficiency, and the wines will easily, 10, 15 years or longer. I think the way to do Petite is to balance the fruit with the tannins and acidity.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
And then AJ, you use it not only straight, but as a blender as well. And
Yeah, I started originally making just straight Petite Sirah only up from 2002 until 2010, 2009. Then 2010 we started playing around with it as a blender, and now we make a variety of wines with it. And Petite Sirah is the core of a lot of our blends, so it's sort of a play on a theme, I guess, and sort of doing things backwards than a lot of people. A lot of people use Petite Sirah as a blender rather than as a core varietal, and I've always done it the opposite. Petite Sirah is sort of the core varietal, and then we sort of build the wines, the other varietals around that. So sort of a reverse approach to making wine than a lot of people use Petite Sirah.
yeah. And Matt, I see you kind of do the same thing, yeah?
Yeah, most of what I do is Petite Sirah. We have 2 vineyard designates. Then I have straight Petite Sirah, and then 3 Petite Sirah driven blends, and then we have I have other varietals that kind of we 25 to 50 cases of, but it gets topped with Petite Sirah all year, so because 60-70% of what I do is Petite Sirah, and so then it ends up topping into those, and I'll use them to round it out, give it a little color, things like that too. So I think everything I do, including my rosé, has Petite Sirah.
Oh wow. Let's talk about how it grows, and particularly how it grows here in Paso. I don't know who wants to take this first, but I'm seeing Paso as being this place that can really do Petite Sirah, can grow it really well, especially in some of our eastern environs where you've got a lot of that like silty clay loam type of soils that are, kind of mid pHs, not all that high, if anything, a little bit more acidic. But it really seems to grow well in those areas, and you guys definitely, since you're sourcing out there and you have vineyards, know way more than I do. Let's talk about how Petite grows here and what it's like as a fruit.
The Petite Sirah I put forward for us to taste today comes from San Miguel. It's right off the river, so it's a sandy loam. It's actually in the basin, I think, based on the water table. That's the one, Roseland Vineyard Petite Sirah. And so, like you're saying, you can kind of see it growing differently. One of the biggest problems with Petite, though, is it's so vigorous. It's known to put 10, 12 tons an acre on, so you really have to manage your canopy, manage your water early to make sure it's not overgrowing, keep your clusters small. I sent you pictures from the clusters of the Roseland Vineyard, actually, where they fit in my hand, where I've seen clusters from, the Central Valley and Lodi area where it takes two hands to hold them because they're so big. Oh yeah, there you go. Mine will be the one with the hand in it.
Yeah.
And so, so it's kind of interesting that way. And so we do well with the heat because Petite Sirah requires a little heat. If you don't get the heat on it, it doesn't really get the full development of flavor. That one's one of mine, I think.
Yep. And then you got
there you can see that one we didn't end up winging, but the one before we took and went and shouldered it, so that's why it doesn't have the separate shoulders. At one point, we would have come through, and in the top, probably by my thumb, there would have been an extra little shoulder that we clipped off. So.
Yeah. Pretty looking fruit.
Yeah,
it's really tight too. There's these clusters are really tight, and AJ, yesterday you were holding one, and I'll pull it up, but you can really see how tight some of these clusters can be.
Yeah, the berries get kind of distorted even because they can be quite tight. That's obviously it's not a very large cluster for Petite Sirah. None of our vineyards actually make very big clusters, but yeah, the berries are certainly tight. You see the same thing happening in Zinfandel. You have varieties that's really tight, and rather than the berries being round, they get kind of squished. Which is not the case with something like Cabernet or Syrah, where the clusters are quite loose and long. Petite Sirah is a real dense cluster.
How does that affect it when it's like coming across, say, like the sorting table and then goes through the destemmer crusher? Is it?
It does fairly well.
Yeah, they destem fine, quite easily actually. They come off the rake, the stem really easily.
It's because it's such a thick-skinned berry. It doesn't shred the way that Zin does coming off the stem. So it's tight like Zin, but it's a much thicker skin, and so it detaches more readily from the rakish.
So Vic, you planted in '98, and we've got some age on your vines, and I think I have a picture of your vineyard coming up here. Just a second here. There we go. What have you seen over the years as far as your vines are concerned, and as they're getting along in a little age? How are they producing as far as fruit goes, and what have you noticed?
Well, putting all the glamour aside, first of all, you saw the tightness of Petite Sirah clusters, and Petite, along with the Zin, neither one's a fan of fall rain. They don't like a lot of rain. Some other varieties, Cab, Merlot, Syrah, loose enough clusters. For the most part, they can handle moderate amounts of rainfall and not have any issues. Petite Sirah definitely can be challenging in wet years. But so the other thing is with Petite Sirah, older vines 20 plus years old, definitely you start to see some infestations. The very famous dead arm Shiraz is basically born out of a vineyard that has Utaipa, and older Petite Sirah vineyards. Typically this is an issue you're dealing with as a farmer, and it's just an ongoing issue that you're farming around. So it's but we don't ever have big tonnages on our Petite. I mean, a big year for us might be 3.5 tons. And our soil type here is highly calcareous, fractured shale soils. So our canopies aren't particularly big on our Petite because the vineyard is relatively micronutrient deficient. So we don't get huge canopies on any vines. Across the vineyard, actually, that was some cab and Syrah and some Viognier. But it gives you an idea of the topography on our property here, rolling hillsides.
Yeah, you can see a little bit of that calcareous, that speckled white down there on the ground there. This is, of course, taken from Vic's Vineyard, but you can see that there's still also a bit of that kind of clay and loam as a part of the topsoil there. But I suspect once you go down 18 inches or so, things get pretty chalky and pretty white, huh?
It just gets rockier the further you go down, at least as far as we've dug.
Yeah. And then I took this picture yesterday of Petite Sirah hanging in the vine. What I really liked about it is the speckled light that's kind of coming through there. But what you were saying is that your canopies aren't that big, so it's not necessarily all that purposeful, I suppose, or is it?
Well,
Light come through.
always do shoot them, to get an air in and around the fruit. So, and yes, we always want air circulation around the clusters, and what variety, but particularly tighter clustered varieties like Petite and Zen. So this is definitely, I'm glad you found this one because this looks like I really did it exactly right.
You can thank Leslie.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we get too far down a rabbit hole with growing, Chris, I want to make a comment because I'm sure a lot of people here, a lot of people are curious. But as far as the growing conditions, you kind of asked the question of why it's well suited to Paso Robles, and so I think I will expand a little bit on that comment, which is Petite Sirah is kind of strange in that it's quite tolerant of a warm climate. It grows in a pretty broad range of climates. You can grow it in the cool end of the Russian River Valley, where they grow it sometimes in Sonoma and relatively cooler climates, all the way to pretty much the warmest climates that we grow in California. It does grow reasonably well and within a broad range. But that being said, even though it grows really well in a lot of hot climates like Lodi or the Central Valley or some areas of the Sierra foothills or the Delta, it's actually really sensitive to the sun. It doesn't like too much sun. And so it's kind of this, one of the things that's really good about Petite Sirah is that it has a really fruit-driven varietal character in a lot of ways. I mean, much the same way Zinfandel is very fruit-driven. It's a very different profile than Zinfandel, but it has a lot of fruit. It definitely leads with fruit. And so it maintains the varietal character kind of across the majority of its climates, which is this dark fruited, blackberry, dark plum, and those kinds of characters. So where something like Syrah, for example, it kind of wavers a lot with varietal character depending on where it's grown. So there's a lot of typicity that comes from Petite Sirah in a lot of climates, which makes it very great as a winemaker's grape because you can grow it in a range of climates and it still has a lot of character. You grow Cabernet in a place that's too hot, it doesn't really taste like Cabernet. You grow it in a place that's too cold and it gets really green and really pyrazine and really, it's a very different character of wine, where Petite Sirah tends to have a actually has a lot of varietal character in all places. So that makes it great. It has a lot of diversity in different climates. So
Yeah. And in Paso, you know, we have about 30 different parent soil series that exist here. But for the most part, it's calcareous, it's sandy loam, it's clay. How about you guys? Are you seeing any particular types of soil within the Paso AVA that you think that's kind of the one, that's where I would prefer to find my Petite?
No, I'm happy to work with any of it and I just treat it differently based on vineyard location because each one's going to have something special about it. So why not enhance what's special? So this one is sandy loam. So I actually make it much more like a cab. It's BSP and bilateral and sandy loam, and so I actually make it a lot like a Bordeaux. And then I have another one that comes off this rocky, steep hillside, very similar to what Vic has. Is actually probably a mile away as the crow flies. And that one I treat much more like a Syrah style or traditional Petite Sirah style because that's what I'm seeing is a lot more like Aaron said is the fruit notes and the minerality, and so I'm promoting those. And so I don't care what kind of soil it is or where it comes from, as long as it's well grown, has all the characters I want. I just treat it based on where it comes from.
Yeah.
I am actually pretty particular about what soils I like about Petite Sirah. I've worked with since 02, 20 different sites for Petite maybe now. We've dialed in what we like, but at the same time, like we like to have a spice box of different flavors. So we work with a lot of different sites because different sites bring different elements to the table. We work with some sites in quite a few sites in the Willow Creek district, which are, you know, the hills like that. And it's basically all rock and limestone. There's not a lot of soil. Those wines are the kind of wines that get winemakers really, really excited. However, I wouldn't say that they make our very best Petite Sirahs. They make a very specific style of Petite Sirah. Very high acidity, very dark, very intense. But I actually think that Petite Sirah likes a little bit more dirt than other varietals. I think that Grenache likes to be killed. I think Grenache likes to like literally live in like the worst soil ever and likes to just be on the verge of death, and it makes great wine. I don't really think the Petite Sirah likes that. I think Petite Sirah is very similar in some regards to Cabernet. I think that it likes to grow a little bit more. I think it likes to have some fertility, but our best sites typically are clay loam soils over high amounts of limestone. But I like to have a couple feet of, you know, more than 18 inches of a little bit of soil depth with limestone below. And I feel like those are the wines that have shown for us in all the years we've been making Petite Sirah, almost 20 now, as our best sites. And we only work with West Side sites for Petite Sirah, but it's really, I think, a combination of not too hot of a climate. We don't want a lot of sunburn, but we also want a little bit of dirt. The sites we have that are sandy, or the sites that we have that are really, really thin limestone soils, I wouldn't say those are our most standout Petite Sirahs, although they add a lot to a blend, but they're not the standalone core of what we do.
Yeah, got it.
Aaron, I was glad to hear you say that when the Petite Sirah vines look terrible, they're happy, because mine must be very happy. Oh, I'm just kidding. So,
yeah.
And to not answer your question, Chris, I've been completely boring. I basically haven't worked with anything else for the last, 18 years. So pretty much just the one trick pony here.
But I got another question though for you, and you started on it, and I'll get the other guys' opinions on it too. But so you had mentioned that it doesn't like late rain, and for the audience, I hope that you can maybe explain why Petite doesn't like late rain, and if it does rain a little late into the season, what do you do? So talk a little bit about that.
Well, as the fruit ripens, the skins do soften, and as tight as those clusters are, you can see that if you have significant rainfall events late in the fall, you will get moisture trapped in between the berries, and that definitely increases bunch rot and or botrytis pressure, both of which would love to have a little tea. Bunch rot, basically makes the wine, the grapes unusable. Most vineyards, and in wet years we've had to do it. We'll just go through the vineyard, and if we see any instance of it, we just drop it. So we don't try to work around it. It's just if the cluster doesn't look right after some rain, it gets dumped. Botrytis is a little more challenging. I'm not a fan of botrytis and Petite Sirah, though it will flourish on the clusters. So in a wet year, but same thing, we just dump it. So it's just the fact that once the moisture gets in between the berries, it just is about impossible to get it out. You can try running an air blast air through with, just the air going and other things that I haven't found any of them to work so well that you can just relax and not go through your vineyard and drop clusters.
Yeah. So let's just say it rains. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. I mean, you get a wind after that rain, and it might maybe help alleviate some of that moisture, right?
Absolutely. The smaller the canopy, the more open the canopy is, the more wind you get within the first, 30, 48 hours after the rain event. And of course, the volume of rain. And was it a cloud burst that lasted for 15 minutes, or is it some long, slow drizzle that goes on for days? Those are two different items. The long, slow drizzle is definitely a disaster. But, a cloud burst and wind afterwards may not even be dropping fruit.
And so for everybody, it doesn't really rain here past April unless we get some crazy, midsummer storm. And then we might start seeing rain again sometimes in the latter part of October. But by Thanksgiving-ish, we should start seeing more steady stream of rain typically. But it doesn't rain a lot here. In the mountains, it might rain as much as 45 inches in a year, where if you go further east, parts really east, and it might be 10 to 13 inches in a year. So we don't typically get that much rain. So if you're someplace that gets 13 inches in a day, yeah, that's our year in some parts. So let's taste some wine. Vic, let's go over the 13 Petite that you have here. And here, let me put up on the screen what we're having, you guys. So
Yeah.
We're all together.
So we, I guess I can do the same thing. There we go. We all have the same bottle. Oh, so anyway, 2013 was actually 13 was a great vintage. It definitely will continue to age in the bottle for a while. With our Petite Sirah, we we don't do a lot of extended maceration. Basically, crush the fruit, 24, 48 hours of just cold maceration before we add yeast. We do use cultured yeast strains on all of our reds. Normally, it's a couple pump overs a day for as long as the cap is reforming. Depending on all of the parameters, if we feel it'll benefit from a little passive skin contact after primary fermentation is done, and we have the tank capacity, and we don't need to harvest something else, we will sometimes leave it on for another, week to 10 days. But normally it's about 2 weeks and gets pressed, settled, goes to barrels. We use about a third new barrels on our reds. Petite Sirah is one of the varieties that we use a fair amount of American oak on. We also will use a little bit of French as well, but again, not a ton of new wood. I'm not a fan of bearing wine in a lot of new wood. So, oak barrels, of course, add flavors, and oak tannins, and I think they should add structure and backbone and complexity to the wine, almost like a seasoning, but they shouldn't be a standalone component.
yeah. And 7 years old, so it's not. This isn't exactly necessarily a total older vintage wine, but I know that Petite can definitely age well. Actually, I was very fortunate to have a 68 Inglenook Petite Sirah at Burn Steakhouse some years ago. And man, oh man, it was still just fresh with plenty of fruit, plenty of life in it. Color had not dropped out. It was such a good wine at that age. So it was I dare say we can age some Petite. What do you guys think of this wine?
It's aging very well. Still got lots of fresh fruit, lots of bright fruit. Still lots of tannin structure. Still has acidity. Definitely got at least another 5 years. Probably 10.
AJ, you're on mute.
Hear me now?
Yeah.
So I heard Vic earlier talk about the balance of tannins and acidity being something that he really seeks in his wines, and that's something I think this wine's has done very well. It has wonderful acidity, but he really has done a great job of balancing the tannins. There's a little bit of firmness, a little bit of that little grip that you kind of expect from Petite Sirah, but the wine actually is quite round and quite soft. And so the tannin management was well done here, I would say.
Yeah.
Definitely tannins along the tongue as opposed to in the cheeks. I've always found that the bitter green tannins are always attacking your cheeks, and the softer, more round tannins are going to be along the tongue. And so this is definitely really well managed tannins. They're just aging perfectly.
What would you guys eat with this? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pastas, red sauces, a little spice to it.
Pork ragu.
I'm guilty of doing beef, so there's a whole bunch of beef things I could imagine with this. Maybe some ribs. So
you know what I get a lot on this wine, kind of where it's at. It's starting to enter that what we call as winemakers the secondary phase, where it's starting to bring on those secondary characters. I get a lot of really strong like chorizo, like paprika and kind of cured meat characters. And so for me, when I'm tasting these wines, I really wish that I had the barbecue fired up and I was cooking kind of some local Portuguese style like linguiça. I think it would go really well with this wine. I got a really cool kind of dark fruit, plum sauce, and like this really cool meatiness to it. So
yeah,
lots of spice.
Right on. Delicious wine. Good job, Vic. That's really good. Is the 13 actually still for sale?
No.
Okay.
That was just for you, Chris. Just for you.
So I got you on the show, even though you're really busy, and you gave me one of your vintage wines. Look at that. We're all special actually today. AJ, we keeping you awake or?
You know what? I'm on this whole thing where I'm trying to not have coffee after 2 because I wake up so early and I can't sleep at night. But I just had an espresso and it did nothing.
So what we're showing.
I think I need a cup of coffee, but I got to be here at 6 a.m. and I don't want to be up.
50% in. We got a ways to go.
We're there. We're there.
50
right?
in?
We're there.
Hey, nice, dude. We're only at 30.
Today, what we're showing for our wines and what we're tasting and talking about, Petite Sirah. And so we did an older vintage. We then have a current vintage Petite Sirah 100%. And then we have a Petite Sirah blend of Petite, Mourvèdre, and Syrah. I was thinking that let's stick to Petite for now and go on to the MCV Petite Sirah and have Matt tell us a little bit about it, and then the guys talk a little bit about it as well to each other. So sharing that.
All right. So this one is from Rosewind Vineyard, which is up in San Miguel, just off the river. Sandy loam soils. It's VSP, very flat. Reminds me a lot of, I just come down from Napa in 2011. And so it reminded me a lot of vineyards there, and so I make it very much like a Bordeaux. So I'm doing longer cold soaking. I'm not really saugnéing very much. I'm doing very long, slow ferments, keeping the ferment very cold. I try and keep it under 84. Ideally, I'm in the 82 range. We're doing délestages on it 3 or 4 times during the ferment, maybe 5 times during the ferment, depending on the year. And then I also do extended macerations on it, which aren't in vogue anymore because they kind of remove some of the phenolics. And so I'm trying to rein in the tannin as well. Same with Vic. I'm creating more tannin, but I'm trying to make it a more of a structured long chain rather than trying to reduce tannin overall. I'm just making it in a different way. And so I find that making it more like a cab gives it kind of a more of a cab feel on the tongue. And so there's fruit, but it's much more restrained, much more in the plum characters. There's mineral as you would expect, but it's much more in the granite range than the chalk range. And then you're getting a plethora of background flavors. And so cardamom and cardamom, cloves, cinnamon, thyme, rosemary, things like that. And then we're doing, this one's about, I'm actually a fan of oak. So I came down from Napa. So, I mean, that's my first job was Quintessence. They're running like 90% new French oak on their stuff. So that was just kind of the way I came up. And so this one's about 70% new French oak, high impact barrels, Nidalier, Colbert's, Seguinro, Icon Elegance, Seguinro Classiques, things like that. And so you're getting a lot of the barrel components in there, the vanilla, the bacon fat, things like that. Only about an 18 to 19 month age time on the oak.
I love the color on this wine, by the way.
And this isn't even the dark one.
No,
My side of Pomar is like the darkest wine I've ever seen. I mean, it looks like black paint. It's insane.
Yeah.
So, but that's one of the best things about Petite Sirah is you don't have to try for color. You get it no matter what you do. So
yeah. But this one also has there's an electric kind of component to its color. It's actually kind of not, almost doesn't look like Petite Sirah necessarily, but it is. It's got this brightness to it that's really pretty. So, what do you guys think of this wine?
Great fruit. Like the structure. Like the acidity. I'm surprised by learning how aggressive you are on the barrel program because I'm not picking up that much, so it's well integrated into the wine. So I really like it. Obviously, this wine, like most Petite Sirahs, but I think this is a great example. I mean, definitely enjoyable now, but certainly someone could choose to age it. So, you know, we know the joke that people pick up a wine on Thursday and they wait till Saturday to think they've aged it, but not a lot of people aging wine these days, but this one would.
So,
Great acid on this wine. Tons of very pure, deep rough, pure focused blackberry. Pretty strong. I actually think this wine has a pretty strong oak profile, but I think it's pretty well integrated. So it's very ripe, but I like it. It's good, well made.
nice.
Definitely dark. I mean, I think this is a great example of a varietal Petite Sirah. I think it's totally on point. This is it's lovely.
Yeah. Matt, what would you eat with this?
lamb for me. Probably something grilled lamb, because it does have a lot of cardamom and those like background flavors. I tend to think something Middle Eastern spice, Moroccan spice, something like that would be kind of interesting. It'll do steak. I think that with the way the tannins are structured, maybe not into the fattier cuts, but certainly like a filet with a sauce would be nice. Or Petite Sirah is just so food friendly. It's amazing. It'll go with pretty much any red meat you put it with, and you can have it with mushrooms if you're or jackfruit if you're a vegetarian or vegan. And it's so diverse in the food profile. You can put it with pretty much anything you want.
Yeah. No, I think this one in particular is quite the sipper on its own as well. The fruit qualities are still quite bright. Granted, it's a 17, but yeah, delicious. So, killer.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Vic. What are you gonna say, Vic?
No.
Oh, nothing. All right. All right. Moving on.
Hey, Chris, real quick.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if everyone is following the little chat.
Oh, yeah. I was going to bring some of those
Kind of like
questions up.
popping up and then like going away. It's hard for me to keep up.
So Paul Maynard brought up a really good point, which is something that I think is a really common consumer experience with Petite Sirah, which is that people associate a lot of Petite Sirah with wines they had maybe their first introduction to Petite Sirah, maybe from the 80s or the 90s, right?
Mhm.
And these styles exist still today, but the original kind of the OG Petite Sirahs from the 80s and 90s were these really, really aggressively tannic wines. Very, as we might call them as winemakers, very angular wines, very intense wines. The kinds of tannins that Matt mentioned, tannins being on the palate kind of in the middle versus being on the outsides of the mouth. These are the tannins that would rip your mouth off. I mean, people associate the dry, what they refer to as dryness in wines, or cotton mouth with wines. And these are those really aggressive, very, very dry tannins. And that's a really distinctive character of the varietal, but it's also something that is a little bit more of an old school style of making Petite Sirah. And what I always talk to consumers about is that it's really similar to, if anyone is watching today, or I'm sure, Vic and you and probably Matt too, have had some of the older Cabernets from Napa Valley from the 70s and the 80s. These wines were so freaking tannic. I mean, they were so aggressive. They were so angular. They were so raw. These are the wines that people would say, just put it away. Don't touch this wine for 20 years while these tannins soften. And the reality is that some of those old Cabernets, the tannins never really did soften. And these old Petite Sirahs, the tannins never really did soften that much. Even 20 years later, they were still dry. They were still aggressive. And I think it was partly because people, winemakers didn't have the experience at that time to understand what it takes to actually what we call resolving tannin in these high tannin varieties, such as Cabernet or Petite Sirah. So nowadays, we pick things a little bit riper. We don't crop things quite as heavy, and we work with different things in the winery to where we can actually make these wines. And you can see this in Cabernets from not just Napa, from all over the state, Paso Robles as well. Now our Petite Sirahs and our Cabernets are these big, rich, round wines, and they have tannin, they have tension, and they perk you up a little bit, but they're not these aggressive and really gnarly wines anymore, because we've learned how to manage a varietal like Petite Sirah that has so much tannin. And that's the skill of the grower and the skill of the winemaker in understanding what it takes to manage that tannin. So consumers shouldn't be scared today to taste Petite Sirah and think, oh, Petite Sirah is so tannic. The more modern examples now are much like Cabernets today, which they're actually these very dark, very rich, can be quite velvety wines. And all the wines we're tasting today are not they're big wines, but they're not these aggressive, mouth-ripping tannins like you might think from you talked about what was it, 1960, Engelnook 60-something?
68, yeah.
Did it still have tannin? Like literally,
Yeah.
right? Like after 50 years, it's like still tannic because things were just made differently back then. So we've learned a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for that and addressing that. And we'll try to get to some more of those questions that are over there in the chat before the end of the show. I think probably getting some over in the Facebook side of things too. So we'll try to get to those as well. Let's talk about Petite as a blender, and whether it's the dominant variety in the bottle versus equal parts or whatever. And that would be your wine, AJ.
Yeah. So this wine's called Trespasser. Trespasser is the first Petite Sirah based blend that I created back in 2010. And so this wine actually started originally as not exactly the same way that we make it now. It actually started as a field blend of Petite Sirah, Zinfandel, and Viognier back in 2010. And we've since tweaked the blend, and ever since pretty much 2011, since the next vintage, this wine is always based around Petite Sirah Mourvedre. So you saw on the label that it's 42% Petite Sirah and 30% Mourvedre, the balance being Syrah. So Petite Sirah and Mourvedre they kind of play, in a blend, they play pretty different sides of the spectrum. Petite Sirah is going to be heavy on the color and heavy on the fruit and heavy on the tannin. Mourvedre is it plays a very different role. It's much more about the savory. It's much more about the funk. It's much more about the texture of the wine. So they don't.
So the tannins don't fight each other, because Mourvèdre is like.
No, not at all. So the best way for me to describe Mourvèdre to people, and this was something from back when I worked at Saxum, and what we always talked about with kind of how Mourvèdre worked, is that Mourvèdre is the base. You think about a song, okay? Mourvèdre is the base. Petite Sirah is a little bit more of the mid-range. Depending on the vineyard, it can play the treble, those high notes. But in this particular wine, Petite Sirah is more sort of the mid-range. But Mourvèdre is that wine that it sits in the background of the wine, and it really rounds the wine out. It brings the wine a ton of length. It gives the wine a lot of dimension. But when you taste the wine, you don't think, oh, Mourvèdre, because it, like bass in a song, it sits in the background. You know, it's not really there. It's not as flashy. Grenache, for example, is a very trebly wine. It jumps out at you. You can taste any wine with Grenache and be like, there's Grenache in that wine for sure. Mourvèdre is way more in the background. So with this wine, we use Petite Sirah as the core, as that structure, that color, that intensity, that richness. Mourvèdre comes with this beautiful savory note. It gives a lot of aromatics to the wine, and it's all length and dimension. This wine is so long. And you'd think, well, Petite Sirah is this big, burly varietal. That's where the length comes from. And Mourvèdre is not a super, super rich wine, but it's the opposite. Mourvèdre is where all the length of this wine comes from. It provides a lot of aromatics. We ferment this with 50% whole clusters, so there's a lot of stems in this, and it brings this really cool, we think it enhances the savory notes in the wine. So yeah, it's just a lot of beauty, I think, to this wine. It's got a good amount of oak on it. I don't remember how much. I should look. It's all French oak, and I wish I could tell you. Let me see if I can tell you what it is. It's probably close to 50%. Might be a little bit more.
Right on.
62% new oak, all French.
Okay.
So pretty high amount of new oak. But I don't think it takes away from the varietal character of the wine at all. I think it's still very pure. But yeah, it's fun wine.
Yeah, delicious. Guys, what do you guys think?
If only we were as pure as the wine, right?
Yep. All right, Aaron, I think it's time for me to have an espresso.
Old man's humor. Anyway,
Oh man.
Tell me, Vic. I want to hear Vic's feedback on this. He's a legend in this audience. He's the elder here. You know, he's the
as opposed to a legend in my own mind, but I great fruit. I do like the length. You know, I'll admit I haven't worked with Mourvèdre, so you're saying that length in the finish is coming from the Mourvèdre. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's pretty wine, for sure.
got some 10s are definitely there. 17s are kind of
Yep,
like that.
no, I'm still getting some pretty firm tannins on it, but again, and I think that's, I guess what I was alluding to earlier is about managing the tannins, because making wines that when someone tries them, you have to tell them, oh yeah, no, just buy it. It'll be great in 10 years. You know, I don't think that benefits any of us, and it doesn't benefit the consumer. You know, we've figured out we can make wines that are enjoyable now that will age. And I think all three of these wines show that. I mean, all three of these wines will age further, and they have plenty of tannin, but they're not those super angular, hard, and or green tannins that were unpleasant that people might have remembered in the 80s.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Matt?
My turn. All right, perfect. I really like the wine. I think it's really well balanced, really elegant. It's really showing like this really ripe blueberry, and you're getting the spice components in there from the Mourvèdre and the Syrah, like a little smoky Syrah, almost like a blackberry cobbler or pie or something like that. And so it just kind of sits on the tongue, and you definitely get the elongation from the Mourvèdre for the back palate, and it just kind of finishes really with a very long palate with the Mourvèdre really jumping forward with that like funky strawberry finish, and and the tannins are just really structured, really round, really sit on top of your tongue as opposed to attacking anything else. It just really slides right along the palate. It's really, really pretty.
Yeah.
From the Mourvèdre for the back palate, it just kind of finishes really with a very long palate with the Mourvèdre really jumping forward with that. Like, is that me or is that you? That was weird.
I'm screwing this all up. I apologize.
Are you recording me right now?
No, I'm trying to look at the Facebook Live thing. I'm blowing it.
No, it's very pretty. Thank you.
Yeah. Right on. What are we eating with this, AJ?
Great question. So I would say this is a pretty big wine, but Trespasser is actually typically one of our softer wines. Typically, a lot of our wines actually get quite a bit bigger than this. I loved what Matt said earlier about. We've talked. Maybe you and I have talked in the past, Chris, about what Petite Sirah goes with. People always picture Petite Sirah being with big foods, but big food, steak isn't the only. It's a very American point of view. Like steak is the only big food out there. The reality is that things like Matt mentioned Moroccan spices. Sometimes things that we would consider maybe lighter foods, but with big flavors. For example, you take blackened salmon grilled over oak. You have a food that's, while it's a delicate meat, it actually has a lot of really big, robust flavors. I think adding Moroccan spices to things like chicken, people probably don't associate Petite Sirah with chicken, but you put, Moroccan spices and things with a really pungent, really intense character to them, and they work really well with this. Think about, I always get a ton of like hoisin and kind of soy characters on my Petite Sirahs. So that combination of that salty, black, savory character with almost that kind of plum sauce richness. And so I'm always thinking like, oh man, we could do something really cool with like think going to Chinatown in San Francisco and getting Peking duck, right? Peking duck, roasted duck, lots of fat, hoisin and plum sauce all over the top. And Petite Sirah, it's like, are you kidding me? It's amazing. That's, people don't go there. I mean, that's not something that the people that are watching today are going to like make Peking duck at home, but like, they're not like, it's not about me telling you what, I'm not going to sit here and tell you exactly what you should have with it. I'm thinking more about expand your palate, expand your mind, think outside of, I'm eating a Petite Sirah night, so we're throwing something on the grill. Because honestly, like our customers, they know that a lot of the wines that we make are based around Petite Sirah. And I don't want to feel like our customers only pull out my wines when they're throwing a steak on the grill, because they don't need to. They can pull them out all the time. Take them with you to dim sum, please. It's my favorite food. So, mix it up and don't be afraid to try something different. And I think that it's a safe bet to say Petite Sirah on steak. It's like, I don't know. It's just like, it's pretty simple, But
I'm totally
I always say Petite Sirah on lamb myself, but I'm with you, man. People need to drink what they like. I had a wine club member bought a bottle of a wine I call Black. It's Petite Sirah, Tanat, Petit Verdot, 3 black grapes. I'm like, oh, did you have it with that ribeye I suggested? He's like, no, I had it with wild caught Alaskan salmon. And I'm like, did you enjoy it? He said, yep. I said, perfect, man. That's all. All we want is for you to enjoy the wines we drink, that we sell you. We want you to take them home, drink them, and love them as much as we love making them.
I'm definitely thinking a mole sauce with this thing.
I'm actually thinking, I'm actually going real traditional on this guy. I'm literally thinking double cut pork chop, pan grilled, just pepper and salt, and then a nice little pan sauce, mustard, shallot, and like rosemary with the beef broth pan sauce would be perfect with this, is what I'm thinking. Real traditional, you know what I mean? But I'm going to try it with dim sum sometime. I'll come trade you a bottle and I'll take it to dim sum, okay?
Sounds good.
Right on, you guys. We're getting up near the end here. I want to give you a chance, a quick shout out. If you're doing something for consumers I know you're busy with harvest, and once again, I'm really grateful to you guys being on, because you both all 3 of you look like you're about to fall asleep. So we're going to wrap things up. But if you've got something coming up though that you want to promote, or if you can go to your website to see something, if you're doing virtual tastings, because Vic, I know you've done a few things and all of you guys are doing stuff. So Vic, why don't we start with you? You got anything coming up that you want people to know about?
Well, our virtual tastings have been I'm not sure we're quite equipped yet to put them on for larger groups. Most of our wine club are used to our lack of technological skills, so they were pretty patient. But I don't have anything scheduled yet. I mean, of course we're all doing tastings by appointment these days, but that's the way we've always done it. And we're pretty much now with Crush and getting rolling. We're pretty much down to weekends, and we'd be glad to have people come out and see us on weekends. And we're actually for Harvest Festival weekend in October, we're actually taking reservations for time slots 11, 1, 3. We want to make sure people have plenty of time here, and we have plenty of tables, and we keep everybody healthy. So, if you're interested in coming that weekend, when I know we're going to have a lot of people, please let us know early. Just, email us. So, but nothing other than our normal, make wine and have people on the weekends.
Right on. All right, Matt.
Yeah, we're doing virtual tastings. Back in April, we invested heavily in doing virtual tastings, and we're not doing like full bottles. We actually sell taster kits. So 2-ounce bottles, we have 3 or 4 different options, and we'll ship you out 2-ounce bottles of every wine as opposed to full bottles. So it keeps the price down. Very easy. We have a wine club we started back in April or May or whatever. My wife did it. She had a killer idea on this stuff. And so we have a whole wine club going where you get monthly shipments for the whole year of like 4 2-ounce bottles of different things. Then we do a Zoom meeting with that. I'm happy to do if you and your friends want to get together and have a private meeting because we've been doing like corporate stuff. I think I got something for Niagara Water for like 70 people next week or 3 weeks from now. Sometime in the middle of harvest, my wife has booked me for a Zoom meeting for 70 people for a corporate thing for these taster kits. And so we're doing that. We're doing on-site, outside tastings, COVID compliant. We're breaking them down into the 2-ounce bottles as well. Plastic glasses, everything to be COVID compliant. My wife had me build these cabanas out of reclaimed wood pallets and fence boards and stuff like that. And so we're doing individual cabanas for 2, which we can turn into 4, 6, 2, 4, 6, 8 people at a time, groups of 8 at a time. For Harvest Fest, we're doing 2 movie nights with cooking demonstrations. And so you show up, I think we're doing a champagne cocktail for the cooking demonstration with my brother-in-law, who's like the James Beard winner chef that does most of our winemaker dinners. He's doing one, and then we got another local chef doing the second one. And I'm not sure what the movies are, but same kind of thing, cabanas, separated seating for an outdoor movie night. We're going to throw up a big sheet thing that my wife bought on the side of one of our 16-foot metal buildings we're in and do a movie night. And then there might be a mommy and me yoga with wine that weekend as well. I'm not sure. Teresa has gone all in on this, us having our spot and everything all together now. So chances are if you call us, we were going to take care of you. So please, come by.
Where do we go? We go to mcvwines.com.
Yep. You'll get all our info there. You can call us, you can email us, you can drive up and knock on the door. If you're wearing a mask, we might open for you. It's COVID after all.
And then for Vic, it's victorhugowinery.com. And last but not least, of course, Aaron Jackson, Aaron Wines. What do you got going on? Anything coming up soon, or you're just looking forward to sleeping?
I am making wine all day, every day. So, however, that being said, if anyone wants to come by the winery, open 5 days a week, and you can I actually need more help. So if anyone wants to come by, do punch downs. People always want to dream about stomping on grapes. Please come on in. We'll have you sign a waiver, and we'll put you right to work. Because
I'll be there.
So I am
like ready. I will feed you wine. I will feed you lunch. I will feed you beer. But if anyone wants to help out, please. I got I got 10 tons of fruit coming next 2 days, and so I'm sweating, and I'm just sitting here on a Zoom call, for God's sake.
Right on,
right
you
there
guys.
with you. I got like random family members.
Yeah, I'm like,
All right, we're gonna wrap this thing up here. So thank you guys for joining me so much. Pour yourself a glass to have a quick cheers with. Hey, next week on the show, we are gonna have a couple journalists on. We're gonna be talking about wine competitions. Believe it or not, it's
winemakers
harder to get winemakers on these shows because it's harvest, right? And so we're gonna start to have some guests on talking a little bit about other things here and there. I've already done it with my previous journalist show, but this time for next week, we're talking about wine competitions because the Central Coast wine competition's coming up here locally. And so I have a few judges on, a head judge, and we're going to talk about what it means to blind taste through hundreds of over a couple of days. And then following that, we're going to talk about behind the label, what happens, how do you produce the label itself, and what goes into some of that thought process and creativity. And then we'll see what comes next for shows. But thank you, everyone, for joining me. Cheers, you guys. Appreciate it. Right on. Thanks for coming on.
yeah, it's great. Thanks, guys.
And go to pasowine.com to see all of our future shows and what we've got coming up. So cool. Thanks, everyone.
Best luck with harvest.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Good luck, Aaron.
Yeah. Everybody.
Okay. Bye, Vic. Thank
Come
you.
by when you're less busy and check out the new spot, dude.